hell yeah, the classic American diner. My friends, I'm coming to America this year. I know I say this all the time, but I cannot wait. And one of the things I want to try the most in America is going to an American diner, having the classic American breakfast. That sounds so amazing, my friends. Life does not get much better than that. I may get emotional. That said, today we are going to find why American diners are the way they are. Should be an amazing one. But before I go into that, let me ask you for one thing. If you can leave a like, thank you so much. Is the best way to show support. Now, if you can subscribe, well, in that case, forget about it. You make my day. Have that in consideration. Link for the original video in my description, and let's go.
Everyone knows what a classic American diner looks like, which is so recognizable that it's been exported around the world as a symbol of American culture. But why do they look...
Oh, the pancakes and the burgers, my friends. I cannot wait. Sorry, I'm already pausing the video. Actually, I have a question for you, and I will try to not pause that much. When was the last time you went to an American diner? Actually, all the diners are American diners to you, my friend. But you know what I'm talking about. Please, my friend, leave me a comment. I read most of them because I want to know how popular diners still are in America. You know what I mean?
That way. Hi, I'm Michael Weitzner, and I've been an architect for over 35 years. Today we're breaking down how architecture and design elements from 3 different eras of U.S. history work together to give the classic American diner that nostalgic glow.
You know what, my friends? American diners, I associate them with rock and roll for some reason. Also with the 60s, the 50s. I don't know why. Maybe because of old movies or something, but they are so gorgeous. Yeah.
So let's take a look at a typical American diner. So the outside has a shape that's reminiscent of a train. In fact, that's how diners...
Oh my God, I never thought about that. That looks like a train.
Got their name. They're named after the dining car on a train. Many of the design elements in a diner are based on the necessities of dining on a train in a railroad car, like booth seating and counter seating and an open kitchen. So I like these 2 photos.
Okay, did you guys know that?
Because they show all the elements that go into the classic American diner. On the exterior, you have that stainless steel, smooth curvature. You've got that Art Deco typography. And then on the interior, you have the checkered floor, you have the booths, you have the globes, and you have the jukebox. In the early part of the 20th century, trains were the dominant form of travel. If you look at some of the earliest diners, they were in fact actual train cars that were placed permanently on the ground. Let's take a look at one now. I love this photo. This is a classic American diner that takes place...
Damn, my friends, no joke, but American history is fascinating.
In an actual dining car that was just taken off the tracks and put on the ground and made into a building. You could see that it's actually a train car with the upper windows there for ventilation and the main windows here for viewing. And you could see how narrow it is, which necessitated a certain kind of design. There's a counter, 1 row of booths, and an open kitchen. And that became some of the classic identifiable features of the American diner. So train travel peaked in the 1920s. Fewer than 10% of Americans drove a car. But by 1950, that had...
Sorry. Stats.
Peaked in the 1920s. Fewer than 10% of Americans drove a car. But by 1950, that had tripled. And unlike with trains, people in cars could stop anytime they wanted. So diners, cafes, motels, and other types of buildings that relied on people coming through their doors started to adapt their designs to people driving in cars going 40 miles an hour. They wanted to be eye-catching. And one of the most important examples of this is Googie's in Los Angeles. So here's a picture of Googie's, which is actually designed by John Lautner, who was...
Do you guys know this brand, Googie's? I know Gucci, but I don't think it's the same thing.
Somewhat of a famous American modernist architect who did the famous Chemosphere house, which looks like a flying saucer that landed in a hollow.
That's awesome. That looks like a spaceship.
Hollywood Hills. But the thing I love about this photo in particular is there's a whole style of architecture which is named after this diner called Googie's. Googie architecture was very optimistic, very exuberant. It was about abstraction and signage and brightness. What I really like about this diner is it looks like it could have been designed in the late 1980s as a deconstructivist piece of architecture with these planes that are connected by glass that almost look like they're falling down. So Googie architecture was coined by the critic Douglas Haskell, who was referring to this diner. It's about loud signs and attention-getting buildings, new sorts of forms. It takes sort of mid-century modern architecture and takes it to a different, less serious place. And it's about a sort of optimism towards the future. Started in the
See, my friends, I like this type of designs. Do you guys, of course you guys remember, but for example, I remember going to McDonald's when I was a kid, and the building was so awesome. Nowadays, it's a very modern building, but feels no soul at all. Do you guys relate with what I'm trying to say? I'm not sure if in America you guys are also going into this direction, probably because we are copying you, so I assume that's the case. But I don't know, I thought buildings being a bit more fun, having more expressions, if that makes sense, you know. It was something that gave a lot of, like I said, a lot of soul to that business, to that building.
1950s that was very influenced by space age sort of technology. Even though it takes its name from this building, this is actually not a prime example of it. It actually morphs into something else. And other designs took the idea of appealing to motorists even further, designing buildings in such a way that motorists didn't even have to leave their car. Let's look at some examples. Okay, this is such a cool photograph because basically what it is, very simple square building in the
Wait, what the hell is this?
middle, and then it's
Wait, don't tell me that you guys have a drive-through diner in America. There is no way.
surrounded by this
No. Drive-through diners sounds really bad.
circular form. And from this building, there are little conveyor belts that bring the food out to the cars. I just think that's brilliant. The building is actually designed as a hub and spokes, which is actually sort of like a wheel. Unintentional.
Okay, this was really back in the day, but I have some people that are a bit old, and I love all of you, my friends. If anyone remembers those, send me an email, send me a commentator. My friends, do something, because I want to know you.
Or not. And so the signage says it's better food. But not only that, it says no tipping. And that's not an instruction. That's actually a
No tipping here.
benefit that they're
That's a European business. Sorry.
It says no tipping. And that's not an instruction. That's actually a benefit that they're advertising. Hey, no waiters, no waitresses, no tipping. Let's take a look.
Well, but there is a chef, right? So
Look at another example. So working on that hub and spoke idea is this sort of circular building, which is very Googie in that it's starting to look a little like a flying saucer or something
oh, I like this one.
a little space age. And what's great about this one is the cars pull right up, but they actually get served by actual people in this one. But it's still a circular building, which is sort of the most efficient way to maximize the amount of cars that can pull up to the front of the building. So basically the building sits in the middle of a parking lot so that cars could come from any direction and pull up and get served. And talk about eye-catching. Look at all that neon. Can't miss Simons. So the popularity of cars continued to increase. And with it, so did Googie-style architecture, which was meant to appeal to the car. And that sort of culminated in Las Vegas. So let's take a look at the iconic
To be fair, I feel like Las Vegas, I like all the lights, all the neons, but Las Vegas is a bit too much.
Vegas sign. So no one driving into Las Vegas can miss this sign. And I love this sign. There's so much going on. All it says is welcome to fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. But within that, there's like 4 different types of typography. There's a starburst at the top. There's this amorphous chevron shape that forms the backdrop. The letters are in these circles for welcome, which one might read as the planets. There's the scripted fabulous, the bright red block letter Las Vegas, and then the smaller Nevada. And it all stands and is supported on this blue armature. Nothing says Googie to me like this sign. So a lot of these flourishes in Googie architecture are really very cartoony, and it almost goes hand in hand with the rise of television at the same time as the rise of the automobile. And these sort of very simple shapes and these very two-dimensional cartoony ideas are part of that. So this is probably the most iconic of those sorts of signs that are representative of Googie. But if you drive
Yeah, when I think about Las Vegas, I actually think about that sign. It's kind of crazy.
anywhere in America, especially in the 50s and 60s, there were tons of other signs for bowling alleys and motels and diners and cafes, and they're ubiquitous throughout the country, especially along the highways. As the excitement of car travel reached its zenith, people were already imagining what would come next. In 1955, for the first time, more people traveled by airplane than they did by train. That same year in 1955, the space race officially kicked off. So when Russia launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, the space race kicked into high gear, culminating with the US landing a man on the moon in 1969. So we went from eating in a train to eating in a car, and now let's start eating in a spaceship. The theme building at LAX. This is such a cool building. Essentially, it's a flying saucer hovering in the air where you can eat, and it's supported by these.
Oh my god, this is a real thing? Of course it's a real thing. We are talking about America, baby. But, oh man, but how do you assess? I guess there is some elevators or something. Damn.
These two main arches, which are actually steel covered in
LA,
stucco,
right?
although they appear to be concrete. And there's a central tower that brings you up into this sort of disc. And within that disc is the restaurant. And what's so cool about this restaurant
Can you imagine the view? Maybe someone watching already visited this place.
is it gives you views in every direction. So this building also represents the evolution of sort of
Oh, it's awesome.
Googie architecture. So it takes eye-catching to a whole other level. So where the round form before was based on maximizing the amount of cars you could bring around a building, here they're staying with that round form, but they're lifting it up in the air to make it reminiscent of this sort of flying saucer, which is very much in keeping with Googie-style architecture. So if this building was sort of hovering, the next building we're going to look at really takes off. And that's the Space Needle in
Oh, the Needle. This is in Washington, right?
Seattle. So
Seattle, yeah. Washington, Seattle.
this is sort of the tallest example that there is of Googie architecture. It continues with that sort of cartoon theme of this flying saucer sort of taking off, and it's very reminiscent of the Jetsons and what they would do in that famous.
Yeah, I remember watching those cartoons, the Jetsons, and I was thinking about that. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing. What?
This cartoon.
How popular this cartoon ended up being in America, my friends?
But I like that it's got this huge armature with these sort of curvilinear shapes. And it's got one disc sort of low to the ground, and this other set of discs really high where people eat and get a whole view of the city. And it sort of represents springing into the air, this whole idea of space travel, where the impossible becomes possible. This is what the future could be. Let's build it now. So although it appears to be very optimistic and very forward-thinking,
Sorry, but there is a diner here.
for me, there was always sort of a level of dystopia involved in these buildings hovering so high, as if the Earth had been destroyed and the only place to go was up. In 1964, the world came to Flushing Meadow in Queens, in New York City. And I think it was the highest point that this style of architecture would reach. And you can see.
Oh my god, I never thought about this, but yeah. These type of buildings are everywhere in America, or at least end up being everywhere.
Again, this sort of idea of the hovering spaceship, this mechanized architecture where it sort of plugs in, and you could see the towers that hover above, like we saw, that were just reminiscent of the Space Needle and the.
That's why Americans believe in aliens. Because you look around and seems like some alien end up building buildings here.
Theme building. This was the last time this sort of architecture, which was so forward and so exuberant, it sort of ended here. So the 1964 World's Fair was all about technology and the optimism of the future and what could be. And then it all came crashing down. That sense of the optimism for the future and the patriotism ubiquitous in the space race came back to Earth with the rise of the Vietnam War and the fight for civil rights and the assassinations. And all of a sudden, The only parts of Googie architecture that sort of remained were the diners and the eateries that had started it. And the Googie
Oh, that's kind of sad. But right now, the SpaceX are still trying to go to the moon, even going to Mars, from what I understand, my friend. So maybe this can make a comeback because America is still number one when it comes to pace English. Am I right? I speak American. To space discovery. You know what I mean?
style, once a vision of the future, became a thing of the past. So today when we see a retro diner and we think of it as a specific time in the 1950s, it's really an amalgam of architecture from the 1920s based on the train, the 1950s based on...
You know what? This video, it was important to me because when I visit a diner in America, I will have even more respect for that type of architecture. Did I say that word correct? Potato.
On the car, the 1960s, based on space travel, and it's sort of this mashup altogether of all those eras.
Awesome.
So to eat in a diner is to experience an expression of some of the best parts of our shared history, our optimism for the future. But in
Put some respect on American diners.
reality, it skips over many of the lowlights that were also present, such as the Great Depression, World War II, segregation, and the Vietnam War. What I love about diners is that familiar menu. They all serve the same stuff. Breakfast and hamburgers. I mean, that's basically it. Throughout the entire country. And there's something so comforting that you could go to a diner anywhere across the US and know what's going to be on the menu. What do you order? Let me know where your favorite diner is.
Okay, I never went, but I'm gonna... Okay, let's imagine I'm in America. Sir, what do you want for breakfast? Oh, thank you so much. Welcome to America. No. The lady said, welcome to America. I say, oh, thank you. I love America. So I would like, please, some American coffee. Wait. I have to work on this because I don't have to say American coffee, American pancakes. If I'm in America, all pancakes are American. Okay. So I'm going to say, I want some coffee, pancakes. Do you have chicken fried steak? No? I do. Okay, bring me that. Biscuits and gravy. A BBJ, if possible. And that's it for now. I'm going to spend so much money, my friends.
Diner is in the comments below.
Okay, also, leave me what you tend to order when you go to a diner. My friend, this video was awesome. I ended up learning so much that, I knew it would be a good video, but I didn't know it would be this good. So leave a like if you also end up enjoying this one, and see you guys in the next one. Bye, my friends.